Take Review, where 4 college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Sipchakchai-Bankard, and I'm here with 3 revolutionaries. First, he knows freedom is no fear, just like Tom Cruise. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Ocean waves, Jen. Ocean waves. I'm doing well. How are you?
Once again, words to live by. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to talk about the movie that we have to talk about today. And he's just trying to be polite. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, Hooterville Junction. I'm good, Jen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I don't remember what comes next. I've done a lot of drugs. I haven't, actually. I'm just referencing the movie. And last but not least, he'll tell you his name is Batman, and he was born sometime in the 80s. It's Antonio Elefano. How are you doing, Antonio?
Okay, there's no need to shout. This is a violation of my space. These are noise triggers. I'm doing fine, Jen.
That sounds even more absurd when you quote it. Great, thank you. All right, listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which is playing in theaters now. If the auteur, Paul Thomas Anderson, doesn't immediately ring a bell, that's okay. We won't judge you too much. But allow me to quickly run through his filmography, which has an incredibly high hit rate. Hard 8, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza, and now One Battle After Another. PTA's, yeah, it's great. It's actually kind of incredible. PTA's, you might be like, because I think when I looked at this list, I was like, wait, those are all PTA movies. That's crazy. PTA's 10th film tells the story of a retired revolutionary who desperately tries to escape the authorities and find his daughter when their dark, complicated past catches up with them. The star-studded cast includes Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Regina Hall, and new discovery, Chase Infinity. If you are listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. And then with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. PT, if listeners think we know the long and convoluted password after listening to this episode, what can they do?
Once they have their phones charged, they can follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Wherever you get podcasts, you can find us. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. We are also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTRpod, or you can search for the hashtag LTRpod to see what each of us individually has been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. Yes, we are not off the grid, unlike characters in this movie. So I want to start with, as usual, the short take. What was everyone's general reaction to One Battle After Another?
I'll start this time. I have this in my hype draft. I have this in my movies fantasy league. I was very worried that it was going to be overhyped the more we were hearing positive things. And it was not. This movie is incredible. I had an amazing time. I think we're going to be talking about this movie for the rest of our lives. And the only other thing that I will say is it is the kind of movie where someone could say, oh, I think this had one of the best supporting performances of, recent years in this. And they could be talking about any of at least 5 different people, which is incredible. Greg, how about you?
Yeah, I guess it was fine. No, I really thought this was special. I was struck by your language there, PT, because I do think I was just slightly overhyped, right? Like, I agree this is a masterpiece. This is a 5-star movie. I'm not going to hesitate at all. But I like the reviews are like, it starts in the first minute and it does not stop. And like an hour in or so, I was like, I'm a little bit like, unsure where this is going. I don't know if it has not stopped or whatever that voice had told me. So I will say that like I maybe was just a little overhyped, but I don't mean to make this at all negative, because this is just an incredible piece of filmmaking. I saw it yesterday, and then I spent today kind of marinating in my thoughts on it in like the best, most richest way, and reconsidering moments and realizing other connections and pieces coming together. And so I give it my absolute highest endorsement. I will say I think it's movie of the year for me, which Sinners was a high bar, so I feel like I'm saying a lot. Just above I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, or whatever that was called. But yeah. Antonio, make this serious. What did you think?
Well, speaking of Sinners, I mean, I feel like this is the first movie since Sinners where the more I think about it, the more I love it, the more I sort of like unravel pieces of it. And it's a movie that sort of demands, I think, like thinking through its various pieces. My Letterboxd review, I said that it was furious and funny, sprawling, but also taut of this moment, and yet surprisingly, miraculously, and mercifully hopeful. And I stand by that. Like, that was sort of my first instinct, and the more I thought about it, the more I sort of engaged with the questions that we have laid out for today, the more I think that that's right. I'm a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan, and this, I think, is probably his best film yet. I'm not sure, maybe we'll see, but I really loved it. Jen, what about you?
This movie is amazing. I loved it. The most successful movies to me are ones that present to you a lot of ideas while also entertaining you and telling a compelling story. And I feel like this one is just the perfect marriage of those two things. I mean, and like I could sort of say that about Sinners as well, which I think is why the comparison so immediately comes up. But this movie really touches on so many important things. We'll get into it in the episode later about kind of like, why does it feel timely and how does it feel timely? But I think it's more than that. I think it really is that, maybe the first hour isn't as kind of like full throttle as Greg was led to believe. But I do think that there's a propulsiveness to this movie that is unlike anything I've ever seen. And that it really just doesn't let up. It just it has you in its grip. And especially in the final two acts, the runtime, which is quite long, really flew by for me. And yeah, that's short enough take, I think, for now. I think I have way more to say because I think there's so much in this movie to say about, like to talk about. But yeah, it was great. It lived up to the hype, which again, I was really skeptical. People were like, this is the movie of the decade. Like, on the big picture, they're talking about whether or not this is gonna alter their 25 for 25 rankings, and I was like, whoa, and
which means top 10 at this point, even, because they said
right,
they won't
they've already
mess
gone
with
through
the ones they've gone through. So top 10 potentially of the century.
Well, and presumably, yes, they have picked a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and this would have to replace it. So, I mean, I hadn't thought about a filmography ranking, but Antonio saying this might be his best movie. Normally, I would be like, that's crazy, because he has so many of the movies you listed earlier, but it's not crazy. Like, it's definitely possible.
I think it is his best in the sense that it's the most accessible without sacrificing any of the substance that and depth that his movies usually have, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because you could go to this movie. Maybe this is taking us to recommendation algorithm. I'll play the sound. Where we establish the audience of the film. I feel like the audience for this is much broader than the average PTA film because it has so much action. It is extremely funny. I laughed through most of this. And I was like, the subject matter of this movie is deeply unfunny, and yet it's hilarious. So I think that it's like you could be really entertained by this and then sort of have a delayed reaction where you're like, wait a minute. This is making me think and feel things, right? You know what I mean?
Before we go into our algorithm, I'm curious, what is everyone's favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie leading into this movie? I'll start since I asked the question. Mine was Boogie Nights, but it's close. Like there are a lot that are way up there. Boogie Nights was still sort of my favorite. What about you all?
I think I've always thought There Will Be Blood is his best, but my favorite is Boogie Nights. except for every once in a while, I think it's Punch Drunk Love.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
For me, it's between There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread, which is like both of those are very serious. They have funny moments in them, but the primary tone is very dramatic. Whereas this, I feel like the primary tone is funny and satirical and irreverent. Yeah, I guess this is a good way to talk about like how do we compare this film to either other PTA films, which we're sort of doing right now, but also just other films in general. The thing I wrote in our outline was like we've already talked about that the buzz for this is very strong. It's kind of unilaterally being praised by critics. It's got 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, 95 on Metacritic. But someone the other day was like, "So what's one battle after another about?" And or like, "What's the deal with this movie?" And I was like, because I just didn't know where to start. So how are we pitching this to other people who haven't seen it?
Well, can I first ask Greg, what was your favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie?
Oh yeah, sorry, he didn't get to answer.
Thank you, PT. I feel seen right now in an important way. No, I'm just kidding. It's a hard question for me, and so I'm going to put all my cards on the table and say that I came to his filmography late. I had seen a couple along the way, but I actually went start to finish in preparation for Licorice Pizza, which was just before this podcast started, right? We didn't talk about
We didn't cover Licorice Pizza, no.
So I came to some of the really great ones really late. So like Phantom Thread, for example, I saw one time actually in a theater, which was nice, but in the like month before Licorice Pizza came out. So I'm a little late and probably would appreciate different ones on the rewatch. So I want to say like I really want to be cool and say Magnolia, but it's not true, right? Like I love Magnolia and I love the ambition of Magnolia. I love Cruise doing something totally different, which he swears he's getting back to. But it's like I saw that one in high school and I just remember when the frogs are flying, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like I just wasn't smart enough yet, which is on me. So I would probably have to go with Boogie Nights as the one I've seen the most and enjoy a lot. But I actually want to put in a plug for Licorice Pizza. That's being like thrown under a couple different buses and every chance it gets. And I found that film really fun and well made and interesting. So I'm not saying it's my favorite, but I'm saying it deserves better than the strays it's catching in the kind of enthusiasm around this one. So Jen, I would say if you saw Eddington this summer, but wanted it to be good, then you should go see One Battle After Another because, and I say that only half mockingly, but it's so interesting to me in the lost episode about Eddington that we never recorded. This is exactly the same kind of project that Eddington was. It's just Eddington missed and stretched things the wrong way too many times, whereas this made all the right choices and nailed it. So when you ask about like why is it the movie of the decade or why is it so of our moment, it's because we are seeing the world around us reflected in this fantastic way and in this dark way, and yet aren't being like called out by it in totally, right? Eddington was all about like, you all suck and here's why. Whereas this is like just this thin thread of hopeful that totally worked for me and abided me, and I loved it. So I really think that's my basic recommendation algorithm. But I would also say, really I might put it in conversation with something like Doctor Strangelove, right? Like that is what I did not expect when I was going to this movie. But if you're into that like really dark parody and just it's here, and that's not in the marketing whatsoever. So that's the recommendation algorithm for me.
Yeah, there's a character in this movie that is like the grandson of a main character of Doctor Strangelove. And I mean, it's probably, even if you've seen the trailer, you can probably guess, but I'm not going to say because we're not in spoiler mode.
I was going to say, to extend Greg's Eddington comparison, the other thing, which I should have mentioned kind of in my short take, is that there's an emotional core to this movie that Eddington just does not have. Like in the characters in Eddington, I'm kind of weirdly fascinated by sometimes, but at no point do I actually like root for them or care about them. Whereas almost all of the characters in this movie, or at least, other than maybe one or two, um, I'm really rooting for it. And I care about the relationship. Like, this is also a family drama that really works, in addition to all the other sort of like political commentary and satire and action, and just like it's a thriller element too, right? Because it is kind of like almost like a 70s paranoia thriller in certain parts of it. And so yeah, I think the fact that through all of that, through all of the layers and all of the action and the nonstop everything that's happening, the fact that I care about the characters still is pretty amazing.
I want to emphasize the comedy in particular because I think that's really hard to pull off and balance with all the other things that you just said, Jen. And I think the comedy is also what I think people will find the most polarizing, at least based on like my Letterboxd friends' reviews. Some people, I mean, some things you just find funny, some things just don't work for you, right? To me, it worked for me. And tonally speaking, what it reminds me of, the comedy part of it reminded me of Armando Iannucci's In the Loop, which is a hilarious satire about British politics. Like it's a very different kind of like subject matter, but in terms of like just maximum satire and just like incredibly funny and sharp, um, I think that it kind of matches that, but then it adds again all the things that Jen just said.
I mean, I second all of those points. I do think, personally, I was most surprised at how funny it was. We know PTA movies can be funny, but there's usually like a sprinkle of funny, or at least for the last 20 years or so, there's been a sprinkle of funny in like more serious stories, whether it's a love story like Licorice Pizza or Punch Drunk Love, or it's these sort of big epics that he's done. I would say if I were talking to someone who is just like, I don't really go to the movies that often, like, should I go see this movie? My pitch to this would be, this is a chase movie. Like, this is a movie where people are running after each other or trying to get away from someone else. And there's just a bunch of incredible chase sequences and scenes. And that's great. And, if you want to sift through it to find all kinds of other meaning, I think there's plenty there, and we will get into that. But at the heart, and I think the reason that this movie got the big budget it got, and the reason it's getting this big marketing push beyond being really, really good and being positioned for, success in the different ways movies can be successful, that it's because it's kind of at heart like a really good action movie that isn't like, quote unquote action movie, but it's a you could categorize this as an action comedy, and it feels weird, but it's true. I will also note here in the recommendation algorithm that these 5 movies have come up across multiple articles and podcast episodes that I was able to listen to. But it was coalesced around Paul Thomas Anderson was a curator for Turner Classic Movies over the weekend, and showed 5 movies that were connected to this or inspirations for this. And they are Running on Empty, Midnight Run, The French Connection, The Battle of Algiers, and The Searchers. So I have not seen all of those, but the sort of like tales of the retired revolutionary of Running on Empty, the road action buddy comedy of Midnight Run, the cops chasing people in like high stakes driving situations of The French Connection, the revolutionary story of the Battle of Algiers, and the I'm hunting to find this person who was taken from me in the West of The Searchers. That's a pretty good mix of what's out there. So it's almost like Paul Thomas Anderson knows what he's doing.
It's like he was intentional with these choices. Yeah, I forgot to add neo-Western to this, but it absolutely is. There's so much happening in the desert, and a lot with sort of like the legacy of the American West in mostly a bad way. All right, are we ready for spoiler mode? Because there is a lot to spoil in this movie.
Yes, although I will add one thing if nothing we have said has intrigued people enough. There is a needle drop. I will not say what it is, but there is a song used in this movie that is so iconically used in one of the great movies of all time that I was like, you can never use that song again. Like that song's taken by this other movie, and it's used so perfectly here that like it got me emotional. Like when it came in the movie, and I've thought about it like a dozen times since then, and I got emotional each time. So I don't know what that means. Like if that's enough, if that's going to change anyone who wasn't already excited to go see this, but like though that level of details in this is incredible.
I didn't know you liked It's Raining Men that much, but yeah, classic song. It's a bop.
Mo Bamba, everybody. I can't talk about it.
Jen, I have one other recommendation before you hit the sound effect button. Go see this in a big, loud theater with a big crowd as fast as you can. My theater was nearly sold out because I was at a very special showing in VistaVision. And I will say, I think there were like 5 seats, not even in the front row. The front row was full. It was like the back corner, behind a pole. And it was fun. It was riotous. It buoyed my spirits. Every time my energy kind of lagged, it was like, oh, it's such a great time. So please go see this in theaters. Don't wait for streaming. No, please stop. Why are you doing that? Go see it right now.
There's a sequence in this where, because I saw this in 70 millimeter IMAX. There's a part of this where I actively started feeling a little queasy. Because it really felt like I was on like a theme park ride of like
Ocean waves.
I'm making the motion
Ocean
so we
waves.
don't. But I'm not going to describe what motion I'm making for our listeners, so it doesn't spoil it. But okay, so if you have not seen One Battle After Another, what are you doing? Go see it, and come back and listen to the rest of our conversation. Okay, oftentimes in spoiler mode, it makes the most sense to just go to the most spoilery spoiler and get it over with. To me, that was maybe you have a different one, but to me, the big reveal of this movie and kind of the hinge of a lot of the plot is that we find out that Willa, formerly known as Charlene, is Lockjaw's daughter. And to me, first of all, that scene is incredible in the way that it like draws out the tension and suspense, where you're watching those little stupid little bars like floating around on that screen. And it's just like I'm on the edge of my seat staring at like pixelated white bars on a DNA test. Like, what are we doing? So yeah. But
I just like the idea of like a tactical paternity test. Right?
Yes.
Right.
It's like in a case ready to unclasp and, little centrifuges. It was a brilliant prop.
There is a great half-star Letterboxd review of this movie that is entirely a critique of the scientific handling of paternity tests. Of like, this is not, I think it's a joke because it's just like, well, there's no way they'd be able to get a good sample in these conditions. You need to be, and it's like a very technical breakdown of what has to happen.
That's funny.
Yes, that is funny.
So my question based on that, because I don't think I actually managed to ask a question. What did you think in that moment? Like, were you predicting a particular outcome? Were you hoping for a particular outcome? Like, and then how does that reveal actually impact the rest of the story?
I thought it was going to be the most interesting for it to be the way it was, which isn't. I don't know if that means I wanted that, like, but especially as soon as he was like, "If this doesn't match, you're fine, and I'm going to let you go. But if it does, there's going to be trouble." It's like, well,
I mean, also that was
I'm here for a movie to see trouble. Like, what are we doing? But also, like, everything about Bob, Leo's character, and his daughter is I think more interesting if they are not biologically related. So, and I never had the moment that Greg talked about of being like, like this isn't living up to the hype. But I definitely did feel like once it was clear early in the movie that Tiana Taylor's character, Perfidy Beverly Hills, Perfidia Beverly Hills, thank you, is goes and meets up with Sean Penn. I was like, oh, that's got it. Like I'm seeing what the some of the dominoes now that I did not know going into this movie. So I figured we were building to that, showdown of some sort. I didn't know it would be in that regard, but yeah, once they were in that church, it was like, or that chapel, it was just sort of like, I don't know if I expected it, but I thought like that would make the most narrative interesting direction.
I agree with PT. I think this is a film that never misses an opportunity to sort of ratchet up the tension and complication. So it doesn't make sense to even raise it as a possibility if you're not going to go through with it. And I also at the moment when it was fairly clear that they slept together, that it was that the daughter was going to be his. I figured pretty early on. But that being said, still knowing that was like 90% probably what was going to happen, it still was an incredibly tense, incredibly well executed scene.
So I would say I was not at all surprised. I thought, the editing in the earlier moment is that she's with Sean Penn with Lockjaw, and then the cut is directly to her with the giant pregnant belly and the machine gun, which, it was in the posters, it was in the trailer, but still absolutely iconic shot that's in a movie. So that was not the surprise. What the surprise to me is that I thought the movie would then make a meal out of the emotions of that. And I don't know, maybe Warner Brothers might have put out a lesser movie this summer with some kind of CGI dog monstrosity that would like build all the tension around like, and wow, it's the family we choose that matters, not the family we're born into. And so I kind of, that's just the natural narrative place. And I should have trusted PTA more and I should have done that. But it's like, we don't even get a scene where Leonardo DiCaprio, like both characters are just set from that moment forward. Like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't mean anything. What matters is that he's been my dad and that he still is my dad. And so that was the part that surprised me and impressed me, how little the movie was interested in it once it had happened.
Here's my question. Jen, you can answer your own question, of course, but after you do that, here's the secondary question. Did Bob know?
I was just going to ask that too. I feel like the film leaves it somewhat ambiguous. I do feel like chances are if Perfidia sent Willa a letter, she probably also sent Bob a letter, and she probably told him, but I think for me originally because I agree that editing is very incriminating in terms of like the order in which we see things happen and the implication. But I sort of thought the film was going to kind of lean more into the ambiguity of like, we don't know, like no one really knows who her biological father is, as opposed to being like, no, we're going to do this test right now. And then so it's interesting because it is a very fresh take on that kind of like like who are your real parents storyline. And they settle it pretty quickly because I think there's a line where Willa says while they're waiting for the test results, like, even if even if we end up with a straight line, I have a father already and you're not him. Like, you mean, like, she's very declarative about that. It doesn't change anything. So, but I don't know. I don't know if Bob ever knew. I think he might. I think I like the idea that he found out at some point and was just like, whatever.
I think Bob didn't know. And I think part of the glory of Leonardo DiCaprio's performance here, and it really is just a great performance, is that he's such a dim bulb that you still root for, that you still think like there's some decency. Like, he's not a great father, but he's like trying and whatever. I think he doesn't know. I don't think that Perfidia wrote him a separate letter. I think for me, I think in my head, it's just she's his daughter as far as he knows, and like that's all that really matters. And she's the one who knows the truth in their relationship, and she's just going to keep it that way. And that's my read of it. I
mean, I go back to the minute where he's put in charge of the baby, right? And of course he thinks he's its father. I'm not ignoring the kind of basic facts of the movie, but there was never like, this is my daughter and I must protect her. It was like, this is the cause. This is the hope of the revolution, right? This is, so in the big picture interview, Leonardo DiCaprio says this movie's Star Wars, and like it totally is, right? He points out, you've got a princess, you've got bounty hunters, you've got Darth Vader, and it totally works. And to me, that's what, like, she's the new hope in that moment, right? And it's like none of the biology matters nearly as much as the ideology. Oh, that came together nicely. So I think that, I assume he doesn't know, and I'm sorry, Jen, I don't like the second letter theory. But I think that last scene together, I think it is 50-50. She could have told him, or she could have not, and it doesn't matter because he's got a cool cell phone now and can take awesome selfies, and she's gonna go save the world, and that's what matters most. So I'm not convinced he knows, but I don't think he even has ever cared to. He hasn't just not asked the question. He doesn't care what the answer is.
Yeah, I don't know if he would say like, oh, this must be Lockjaw's kid, but I don't think he ever was like, I'm the only guy for her, for Perfidia. Like, he never seemed to be, jealous in that way or suspicious. But I think it works either way, and I think the ambiguity is good and intentional. And to Greg's point, like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's his daughter, and that's the way things have been. So the next question, though, based on what Greg said, is, did Bob really not know how to take a selfie, or was he pretending to not know? Because he does take one immediately once she leaves the room. He does figure out how to correctly take a selfie. So did he always know and he was pretending to be bumbling and a tech novice? Unclear.
Can I just say, like, 1,000% agree with Antonio. This DiCaprio performance is like incredible, and there's a reason he's the biggest movie star in the world. But like, the most memorable moment for me is that last shot where he takes the selfie and he puts on like the total dad sideways goofball grin that I do all the time when I take a selfie. And was like, man, he nails it. Like, it's actually, he does the bumbling dad so well. I get that he's an actor, but it's actually hard for me to believe he's not a dad, right? Like, he just inhabits that character so well. So, yeah.
I feel like there's multiple moments in this movie where I was like, oh, the movie's leveling up, or this movie is going to an even better place. And like, one of those for me was when he gets the phone call at home, and it's clear that like, problems happening, things are on the way, and he doesn't know the code, and he's like, I have to go into action, and then he just sits there for like a few seconds, and then he just finishes his joint, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, he's not someone who's like immediately sober. His problem is that he remains goofy and a bumbling stone dad in the woods, but he has to try to re-inhabit his younger active revolutionary self. And that's wonderful.
I do think that he is still a really good dad, though, because there are a couple key moments. Well, first of all, his crying with the teacher at the parent-teacher conference can really relate. When
just because you vape at the conference, but yeah. Otherwise,
sorry, sir, you cannot do that here. But that's that like rush of relief that he has when he hears that Willa is a well-adjusted, good student who likes going to school and is like actually pretty normal, unlike him. and it's I feel like that moment was so relatable because, like, as a parent, you assume that you're constantly traumatizing and messing up your child, right? And that's under normal circumstances, not the crazy circumstances of this father and daughter in this movie. And so when he kind of just like breaks down because he's like, oh, thank goodness, like, I didn't screw this up. So there's that moment, which I really liked. And then there's also that moment where she's kind of talking back to him because he's giving her a hard time about going to the dance and who are your friends and all that sort of stuff. And then he kind of starts like scolding her, but then catches himself and is like, no, like, you should always tell me what you think, and you should talk back to me. And I don't want you to be submissive. I don't want, you know what I mean? Like, and I was like, this is like grade A parenting right here. This is amazing. And like that and even though he is a bumbling idiot and spends more than half of this movie like freaking out and clueless, you still get the sense that he is not just a good dad, but like trying to actually practice like what his ideology and the cause is espousing, right? Like he's not a hypocrite. You can call him lots of things, but you cannot call him a hypocrite, right?
So earlier, a lot of us talked about Boogie Nights as being one of our favorite movies. I read an article that Leonardo DiCaprio was originally supposed to be the lead, right, Dirk, and that film, and regretted not being able to do it. He did Titanic
Not a bad
instead,
choice.
which
That
is
worked out for
not
him.
a bad choice. It did work out, but I'm so glad that so many years later that he got to work with him on a completely different project and a completely different character, but he really got to, really sink his teeth into a really meaty role.
Does that mean Mark Wahlberg could have been in Titanic?
I don't know that he was second on the sheet for Titanic, but anyway.
I
now
agree
I'm
with you,
rerunning
Jen,
famous
and-
lines from a Titanic
Yeah.
with a Boston accent. It's amazing.
King of the world.
I was just gonna agree with you, Jen, and you used for my opening quote the "I'm just trying to be polite" line, and I put that as my letterbox review, and beloved listener Hasib responded, "What's up, homie?" And like that whole scene is so beautiful because he is at once, and this just underscores what you said. He's at once the dorky dad, but he's trying, right? Like I think when I look around my students, I think of how far I get by trying to accept them where they are and how meaningful that is and how validating that is for some students. And I look at my older colleagues who don't do that and I'm like, you're crazy. Like meet them where they are. Like, yes, you'll screw up the pronouns, but just try, right? It doesn't cost you anything. Maybe I'm on a soapbox there, but it's like so great to me that he hasn't changed. Well, let me say it this way. His hardware hasn't changed, but the software is running a little slow. Or maybe it's the opposite. I don't know computers, right? The hardware is running a little slow, but the software is still running the same program. He's trying to be a good progressive as a part of this. And, I have some really good friends that are, dyed in the wool progressives trying to raise a college kid and a high school senior. And they're doing a fantastic job of like reminding them that all this still matters. And yet the kids at times hate it, right? Like that's just the nature of the relationship. And, it's beautifully wrought here and kind of fantastic. PTA pointed out in one interview that if you look in the background at all the scenes at the cabin, there's like cool slides, like overgrown in weeds and stuff like that. So it shows they probably had like an idyllic raising of this daughter, and now she's out in the world, and that's the pain of raising a child, right? You can drop in Miles Morales' mom's speech from the second Spider-Verse movie. That's the thing that makes me cry every time I hear it. But it's the truth, right? You can only control so much, and you have to let your kid out in the world. And this is not quite that moment, but it's the moment with reckoning what he's lost and what he's gained from letting her out in the world.
So to try to segue to our next question, I think we're all kind of in agreement that this father-daughter relationship is the central one of this movie. And yet Willa, as we meet her, played by Chase Infinity, doesn't really show up until like probably about 40 minutes in to the movie, right? And it spends, the Greg has noted in this really good question he put in here that the film spends most of its first hour, so maybe it's more than 40 minutes. This movie is long, on events that predate. In particular, you're right, Greg. I hadn't really put this together, but you noted that it sort of like the trailers and the marketing for this film only focus on Leo in the bathrobe, right, and not about everything that happens at the beginning of the movie. What did we all think about this? Like, what is the first act of this movie? Kind of the I've heard critics call it like a prologue, where it's kind of like the backstory of Perfidia and Pat, now Bob. What did you think about this choice? How does it change the story as a whole? Like, what does it contribute to the overall story? Greg, you want to take first crack?
Sure.
This is your question.
I had one succinct thought that sums up the first hour. Like, oh my God, Teyana Taylor. Like, she is such a screen presence and so incredible that, like, I've never felt the kind of energy come so strong. And the moment that stands out is around the bonfire where she's laughing and joking with her friend, and Leonardo DiCaprio is like, sorry, Bob. He's not Bob at that point.
Pat.
Pat. He's like I don't think she even knows she's pregnant, and like it feels like that kind of energy. And I think that the trailers had really focused on Leonardo DiCaprio. He's the movie star. Like, there's obviously a reason for this and why you put him on the poster holding a gun to kind of sell the action. But I thought so many of the themes to me had to be rooted in that first act, and that this really had this kind of vibrancy that got me really excited. And that moment I expressed in my opening where I kind of felt the energy lag was the switch over to 16 years later, and that kind of first chunk in the present before the action really takes off. I'm like, I don't know if I love all of these beats, or it kind of took me a little while to lock into what Bob was doing with all the phone calls and so on. And once I did, I got there and I was totally great. But I think part of that was just like this incredible first act leading up to one of the better car chases in the last like 5 years of movies, Furiosa included. And it's probably only second to the car chase at the end of the movie. So it's a pretty incredible, like, it would be great as like a short film of like Diary of an Anarchist or something. Maybe he can get an Oscar that way, like Wes Anderson did.
I totally agree. I thought that Perfidia, Tiana Taylor, absolutely electric in that first act. She just dominated every scene that she's in. My wife Janine, she thought that when I asked her at the end, what she thought of the movie, she had two complaints, and one of them involved Perfidia, and she said she's like, I just didn't think that she would have betrayed. Like, she seemed like the most loyal to the cause, and I just didn't. I didn't buy that. I think that I think it's really easy. Well, not easy, but I think that it's one thing to declare what you are, to say what you're willing to sacrifice for a cause. I think it's much harder to actually like bear that sacrifice over time. And I think that we're meant to view her character not as like a symbol of rebellion. The ones who died ultimately sort of as sort of martyrs can function as that, but as a three-dimensional flawed human being who believed in a cause but was ultimately unwilling to give up her entire life for it. And there was a part of me that was a little worried as the movie was moving along to its climax, that we were going to see her somehow, that she was going to pop up, that she was going to save her daughter. And I think that a lesser movie would have made that choice, maybe, right? Because it would have been a fun callback. You bring back this character who is just like such a presence at the beginning, and how satisfying to have her come back because she loves her daughter or whatever. But I think it makes more sense for her to just be gone. Right. And for her story to be done. And I think that the sort of the tragedy of that character's ending and how her betrayal just like ripples through that rebellion and the French 75, I think that sets the sort of necessary foundation for the movie. As fun as that first section is, there's a sorrow, right? Because there's a lot that comes as a consequence of that. So I really loved that first act. A lot about the marketing of the movie, I think you're absolutely right, Greg. Of course, you focus on Leonardo DiCaprio, but as a result, what I saw for the trailers was just like, I have no idea what this is. And I'm a little worried it's going to be bad, right? I'm like slightly worried it's going to be bad. And then, but once I saw that for the first act and realized what it was, then I knew I was in for smooth sailing, and that I was just willing to go on for that ride.
I think the trailer issue is it's really hard to describe the dynamics succinctly of what's going on. And the parts that are maybe simple to describe are things they maybe don't want to, like, it's a father-daughter story. Like, they don't really want to maybe fully like frame it around that. And then they tried to pick out parts that are very funny in the flow of the movie, but on their own weren't. Like, even that first trailer with the phone call, like in the movie, I love that. I love the whole phone call, the payphone outside the supermarket. But the trailer, I was like, what exactly is happening? Like, what are we doing? Anyway, I'm with you on that, Antonio. I am fully on board. I'm co-signing the Tiana Taylor love. Real ones remember the movie 1001 from a few years ago, where she was incredible. Letter-nominated performance for that movie. And yeah, she's exceptional in this. And it is interesting that she is the main character for the first hour of this movie. And, you know, I think that you need to spend that much time with her for her absence from the three main characters of part two to like make the most sense. Like the dynamic of Lockjaw Bob and Willa, like they're bouncing between each other, and all the chase is happening because she's not there, because she's sort of the center of all that's going on. And the only other thing I will say is she was a rat and everyone called her a rat, and that was bad and that's sad. Like Antonio said, there's like that sorrow at the part of it, but also like, doesn't she, maybe I'm misremembering or maybe I'm misreading, but doesn't she make that choice to flip to rat out everybody except Pat and her daughter? Like everybody else gets named, but, and you know, they run away, but when they do come back around to try to find them, it's not like, oh yeah, like that's the one people we were looking for. So it's sort of like, oh yeah, there was another guy, and that like he was kind of nobody, and he did seem like he was kind of like, you know, G tier in the French 75 organization. He was not. It was funny how he's the blast guy, he's Rocket Man, and he's just setting off fireworks. Like that's what he's doing in the opening scene. He's not like, he does know how to do explosives, I guess, but like we only ever see him setting up fireworks. So yeah. Anyway, I think that there's something that is, you know, obviously still bad for the cause and bad for the other people. Poor Alana Haim, after being a star of the previous movie, does not last very long in this one. Pretty brutal and quick dismissal here. Wood Harris as well. Shout out Avon Barksdale. Doesn't last very long, but you know, part of that is in the aim of protecting. If she doesn't do that, Lockjaw's going to find the whole group, which means he's going to find the daughter, which means he might realize it's his daughter, which might change that baby's entire life. So, you know, that's part of what she does. She sacrifices her place in the movement and her kind of drive and her beliefs, and also the power she gets from it, which is clearly like, that's the gun and that's that scene around the campfire. Like there's so much interesting stuff in the beginning about power and sexuality and psychosexual dynamics between the different characters in that first sequence. And she gives all that up and then literally just walks out of the movie. She just crosses the border and disappears, which is, I think is great. The end of all of my comments are going to be, and it's great. Just to note for the rest of the episode.
I had a similar thought in terms of like, does the time we spend with Perfidia need to be so extended, right? And I think part of it is because she's a ghost that haunts the rest of the movie, and there are so many comments made about Willa framed in terms of Perfidia, right? Like that she has the same, people like can just sense that she has the same sort of power, right? She's not, her personality seems very different in terms of how that power presents, but they're like, you have what your mother had. And for some people that's considered a negative thing, right? Then all the nuns are like really skeptical about her because they're like, are you a baby rat? And then it becomes like a point of resentment for Lockjaw because he's like, I see you have the same sort of like fury and strength that your mother did. And because like she left him, right? Like that becomes a pain point for him and like makes him even angrier at Willa. And so I feel like we feel those references, that lineage that people are drawing, like the kind of like, oh, I knew your mother. You just look. I like also like the twist on like, do I look just like her? And they're like, no. But on the inside you do, right? But I feel like those references are less powerful if we didn't actually see Teyana Taylor just like owning the screen for that period of time. Yeah. But it's also like, to me, there's like a generational, not comparison, but there definitely is like the film. And I think, you know, PTA, a lot of his movies are either about or take place during the 70s. Right. And so I do think that section of the movie is working out some things in terms of like how we romanticize political radicals of that time period, but like how they are very different than the ones that we have now. And like, so I do think that that giving that much time to that era, regardless of the perfidia factor, I think is also important.
So that seems like a way to open up this question of time, which I think is an interesting one. So when you're talking and you're like, oh, it's like it's the same but different, I was like, yeah, Jen, it's one battle after another, right? Like it's kind of all there that this is like the string of events, but it is also the generational gap from one to the other. And I do think it's really interesting when we think about perfidia in that context, because you said it right. There's something very 70s about her and blaxploitation and the kind of violence we see the French 75 enacting, I think is all like very much of that time period. But according to the movie, that's like 2008, 2009, right? Like it's this weird kind of mash of the two. So I think Perfidia is that kind of character, and your very interesting questions of like, what do we make of her in regards to that fact? Like you said, she's a ghost, she's kind of missing, but like, how is that different when we picture her in like 2008, 2009, right? That's what I'm struggling with about her character.
She just thinks Occupy Wall Street isn't going far enough. And that's their more revolutionary version of it. It's also interesting because I had thought for a while that she was working in 2025 and then the rest of the movie is in 2040 and we're in the future and just very little has changed. You know, in the voiceover is it's been 16 years and very little has changed, like that. Like it's left intentionally unclear. I mean, there's no like near future tech, so I think your read makes the most sense. But we have not said this, and listeners may not know that this is based lightly, or is I think inspired by, is the actual credit, by the Thomas Pynchon book Vineland, which was written in the 80s, came out in like 1990 or 91, but is set in 1984 and is about sort of retired 60s leftist radicals, the kind of weather underground, like who went and blew up some stuff from time to time. So, there is that kind of sense that we're out of time here because it's like they're kind of a 60s radical group, but there's also got this like 80s politics underpinning it, but then also it's obviously very present. And I think there's elements of this movie that were meant to be an exaggeration of like what might, like, if modern America went in a worse direction, what might be the exaggerated version? And by the time it came out, we were there or past that in reality. And so, there is this whole mix where it is kind of like, I guess this would be weird if Perfidia was doing all of this in 2009 based on our memories of 2009. But on the other hand, it's sort of like maybe the revolutionaries would have said all the clues were there that we could end up where we are now in reality. And so, within the context of this movie, it was like, yeah, they're on the front lines, and it's taken up until 2025 for more people to be nervous and more people to be worried and think that maybe stuff has to change.
This is exactly what I wanted to talk about in Thesis, please. So I'm just making it official, and then Antonio, you can continue.
Thesis, please.
Because I do want to know about like what is this movie saying about time? I have a whole thing, but Antonio, go ahead.
Well, okay. I think Paul Thomas Anderson gives us like two extremes here, right? There's the is it called the Christmas Club? The Christmas what's the full
Christmas Adventurers Club?
The Christmas Adventurers Club. Yes, that's right. The Christmas Adventurers Club on one end and the French 75 on the other. And to me, what makes this movie timeless is that there's always going to be these two sort of extremes, and whatever version you sort of want to take of each, there's remarkable sturdiness and the stubborn convictions of both. There will always be powerful people who will insist that their power is just like this God-given entitlement, and that their entire function on earth is to maintain that and to keep that and to keep everyone else down. And there will always be rebels who will correctly believe that those people are wrong, but correctly or incorrectly believe that the solution is to burn everything to the ground. And the fight between the two extremes will always exist, and actual progress sort of happens in the middle, but you still have those extremes, and those extremes are just the loudest things that exist, right? So I think that's what makes the I mean, that's again the sort of delicate tightrope of this movie is that we've listed a bunch of genres at the beginning, right? In the recommendation algorithm, we listed a bunch of different genres and a bunch of different films, and you can see the roots of all. Like when you said Running on Empty, PT, I love that movie, and there's definitely an emotional core to that film that exists here, right? So I didn't even see that, but now I can see it, right? But that it can do that, and that it could, and that also I still see In the Loop, right? Another one of my favorite movies, but a completely different thing, and that it can successfully be all of those things, and that it can successfully also, I think that, what was the movie last year that was nominated for best screenplay, but that none of us wanted to watch because it looked kind of like fine. It was like it was about the
September 5.
That's it. That
I
was the
watched
one, right? And okay, yes. And I think if I watched it, I'm sure it would be fine. But there was no urgency for me to watch it. There was no urgency that none of us were just like, I can't wait for that movie, because I think there was a sense that all of us sort of like knew what that movie would be. We knew kind of what the lessons of that film would be. And what was interesting here, I think, is that by taking a satirical route, it frees the director. I mean, basically, he skewers everything, right? He skewers the Christmas Club, of course, but he also skewers the Rebels too, right? That like particularly through Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, and that's part of the glory of his performance, is there's just this no vanity, and that he's just willing to just have this sort of blank look on his face through a lot of the movie, but he still anchors it in something human enough to where we still root for him. But I think that I think the risk of making a really heavy, timely, like politically charged movie right now is that it's hard to do that without taking a side and then alienating like a big portion of like your potential audience. I think that the movie definitely takes a side, but I think that in skewering throughout the course of the film, like both extremes, I think that it's still there's an accessibility about it that still allows it to be, as we've all said, entertaining, and still give us all of this food for thought for us to talk about.
That's really well said. It mostly answers my question.
But please,
so maybe
please expand out, because I thought it was really compelling that you looped in the kind of catchphrase here. I do think that that's not a mistake. So can you explain your thinking? Because your thinking often inspires us. No
Thanks,
pressure,
Greg.
though.
Well, so I just had sort of seen this through line about time throughout different parts of the movie, and the very comic scene that we keep referencing is the sort of like customer service call gone wrong that Leonardo DiCaprio has, where he's asking for Comrade Josh's manager, pulling a what is it called? Like it's a Greyhawk
Gray Strike 80 or something.
like that. Yeah. It's so funny and so relatable, because it kind of echoes a lot of like when if you've been on a frustrating customer service call, like there's a lot of stuff on there that like is very relatable. But the thing that keeps getting repeated that he can't answer is, what time is it, right? And hilariously, Benicio del Toro from like the bathroom is like 8:15. Like he's like, why is this a complicated question? Right? Like just tell him what time it is. But that's not the answer, right? And the answer, we finally realize that, and it's very pointed that Leonardo DiCaprio never remembers or Pat/Bob never really remembers what the answer actually is. He doesn't like recall it and have an epiphany. He's just like, I don't know, why you keep asking me this? And the answer ends up being, time doesn't exist, yet it controls us anyway, which seems very provocative and like could be like kind of a key through which to unlock all the stuff that we were just talking about in terms of like, it feels like the 60s and 70s, but the math doesn't add up. It's not. But then it's like 16 years later, and like, what is this? The future? Is this the present? Like, what's going on? And yet the feeling of the movie, the ideology, like Antonio was outlining, the basic ideologies and kind of the political spectrum in general, and it feels very timeless. And it's kind of like it's doing what Eddington could not do, because I think Eddington so hones in on the moment of COVID, and it's almost too specific to be meaningful. Like in 10 years, are people going to be like, well, that was a weird movie, where people were fighting over masks for like, you know what I mean? Like it's very of that time, too much of that time, Whereas this movie, I think, is doing the smarter thing of like pulling out the broader ideas. And so it's like time doesn't exist because it's this alternate sort of like not quite our time, but very much is our time. And we can still relate to it, engage with it. And then the title of the film like also feels like plugged into this because it's kind of like we don't get a break in time, right? It's like one battle after another. Sort of implies, I know PT was saying it's like, well, there's the first part of the movie and then the second part, there are two battles, one after the other. But I also feel like it kind of like has this like almost like dreamlike loop in which it's like, no, we're just fighting the same battle over and over again, and the battle itself is never going to go away, and we're never going to catch our breath. It's just always going to start again, and like interminably, right? And that transition between the two time periods, and I promise I'm going to be done, is that, and again, PT referenced this earlier, but the voiceover says, and 16 years later, very little had changed. So again, it's this sort of like weird thing where like we're stuck in a time loop. Time doesn't exist, and yet it controls us anyway. So like, but I know all those things feel very connected to me, and yet I'm like, what is he trying to say? What is he trying to tell us, PTA, about history, time, and social progress, revolution? Is it? I agree that the movie ultimately is very hopeful, but at the same time, it also has this kind of like, we're just stuck in Groundhog Day kind of feel to it a little bit.
So this is my version of Antonio's thing, but not as well constructed as what Antonio said, I'm going to guess. But in thinking about this, I think that you're right in terms of the one battle after another. It's that like we are perpetually in this struggle of like how we like are going to structure society and live in society. And to me, the core of what he's denouncing, like the movie is denouncing, is a struggle for power, of like who wants to have power over other people. And so Antonio's point about the like, oh, there's the extremes, you know, I mean, I think there's sort of an asymmetrical like balance between the two, of like there's usually like, you know, a small ragtag bunch of radicals, but then like the huge like system, which has a small ragtag group in the Christmas Adventurers Club, but they are just like the core of, you know, the man that's kind of overlooking everything. And, you know, they're kind of going back and forth, and there's progress that maybe happens, and then there's you know, ocean waves, things move in, things move out of the tide of which direction things are going. And the answer, to the degree there's an answer in this movie, is to go back to what Greg referenced of the interview with Leo and Paul Thomas Anderson on The Big Picture, when Leo said this movie is Star Wars. The part that Greg forgot is this movie has a Yoda, and the Yoda is Benicio del Toro. That's Sensei, and Sensei isn't trying to get power. He's trying to build community. He's building this group of people who are just trying to help each other. You know, he says, we've got, what does he say? Like a Latino Harriet Tubman. And he says like, no cash. Like there's no money. It's
all
not
heart,
about money. It's
no
not about
cash.
power. What?
All heart, no cash.
All heart, no cash. It's all just about trying to help other people and get them through and move them along. And, you know, that's him. That's him the whole time. And he's always chill. He's always like managing like 20 different things. When Leo comes into that apartment and is all like frenzied, like on his like 8th attempt to find a plug, he's like, let me introduce you to everybody in this room. Like, this is our newest one. This is this is this old couple that's here. Like, it's all about people, and it's all about again, a community that he has built, and the way that people interact. And that's the way to win the battles, is you're not trying to fight against the power hungry who have power. You're trying to like build your own space, and like the space is what wins, and the space is who you are. And that's why at the end, like, you know, Leo, Bob and Willa can have their phones, and he can take their selfies, and they can live their life because they have their life, and they have each other, and they have their people, and they're not isolating because she's still going out to go off to a protest. And that's not like to disconnect from the world, but a protest is a community, and a protest is trying to work together. It's not trying to like blow something up to claim the power of it. And, you know, I think that's sort of what's there at the heart of it, is that it's not about controlling other people or controlling like the world and then having power over what other people can or can't do. It's about being together and being like in your own group. And it's great.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think. Oops, sorry.
You go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think that I just largely agree with what the three of you had said, but I will say my reading of it in the theater was much more through the lens of generations, and I see Sean Penn's character Lockjaw as just prime boomer, right? And I see Leonardo DiCaprio, although he tells the police he's born in the '80s, and I think that makes more sense. He's pure Gen X to me, which aligns him more with PTA himself. And I do think, Gen X as this, you know, age, all these generational categories are rough, as we all know. They're problematic, but as a generation that really pushed back against those power structures and had big designs, against the corporatization of everything, and all of the because all the places that get blown up are banks, right? So it's against like the capitalist system, and reproductive rights are part of her manifesto, right? Like they're all in the mix there that feel like very Gen X values to me. And I do think there is this funny moment now where, for a variety of reasons, Gen X lost the fight, right? And I see in this moment Leonardo DiCaprio as a mouthpiece for like, we thought we could nail it, our bad, right? Like we didn't get there, right? And you take the journey so far, you take the battle as far as you can, and then he's turning it over in this beautiful way to his daughter. And when that last needle drop comes on, which I assume is the one that made PT cry, because it made me cry as
Correct.
well. I have no idea what other movie that's in, which is bothering me. You'll tell me in a minute, I'm sure. But when it comes on and, you get Tom Petty singing She Was an American Girl, I was just sitting there being like, yes, this is it. This is all we have, is this hope that we've, maybe lost the larger battle, but we've instilled in the next generation, which I guess she would be, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I'm less clear on those distinctions, but we've instilled in them the hope and the belief. And, I think a lot of us right now, that's where our hope comes from, is that we are in this really dark time with everything seemingly lost for all the causes that the progressive forces believed in. But there's this glimmer that the young people get it, and they're going to keep the fight up. And that will be the next battle after this one, even if, I just kind of wrote us millennials out of the history, but that's okay. We get blamed for enough, so we can be out of it. But I find that to be very moving and beautiful to kind of get to that age where you admit, we kind of bumbled it, and we didn't do enough. And I hope that the next generation is ready, because we're going to need you. PT, what's the other movie?
Well, first I was going to say that's part of what I say at the end of every semester to my classes is like, we've been talking about trying to like communicate and write to other people, and that like they have to leave and change the world and make it better, because I didn't. Like my generation didn't do that, and so they have to go out and do that. And I do think that is important. I will also say, Bob's probably lying when he says he was born in the 80s, because he also says he's Batman. But if the movie is set in the future, in like 2040, the millennials of the 1980s will be the Gen X of now, because that's kind of how it works out. American Girl is in Silence of the Lambs. It's what the senator's daughter is listening to when she's driving her car, and then takes is trying to get sees the guy trying to get his sofa out, and then gets trapped in the van. It's the American Girl's playing over the whole scene.
Okay.
I always thought of that sequence whenever I heard American Girl, until Saturday, because now I will think about the end of this movie.
I just want to co-sign. I've thought of that needle drop. It's like at once so obvious and dumb, but so like revolutionary and moving, that I also have been like fist pumping when I hear it. I haven't been crying because, I'm a man's man. But I have been really excited, like remembering that. And it leaves you on such a high when you're walking out of the theater. It was really a great choice.
Antonio, earlier you were also going to say something.
Oh, this is to harken back to what PT was saying about Benicio del Toro and the sort of resistance and how he's orchestrating all of these folks. I appreciated that resistance in the film wasn't just played for sort of easy pathos. Like we don't see like kids ripped away from their parents. We see them instead like playing like with the little foil stuff in the cages, which is even like more chilling in a lot of ways in the normalization of that sort of horror. But I thought that it was a great way to watch the resistance show up in ways less extreme than robbing a bank. The way that Bob is ultimately rescued, I think, from his detention and from the hospital was just like, with just like a series of like people making like sly moves to move him out. It was just a nice way of giving, I think, some agency to like the oppressed like population of this film, rather than just sort of framing them as objects to be saved. Like they're doing stuff too, right? They're working hard to make this happen, right? And so I really enjoyed that layer of the film, being there and feeling as present as it did.
Yeah, and it doesn't like it provides a good model that when we think of people being radical or rebelling, we immediately go to something like the French 75 that's like loud and violent,
Yeah.
right? But then to like juxtapose that with these nurses just quietly just like being subversive as they're doing their job. They're not making a lot of noise, they're not blowing up anything, and yet they're still being, doing what they can to like sort of like stick it to the man, right? The other thing too, because while we're talking, because I don't know if we're going to get another chance to talk about the Benicio del Toro and his community of people that he's kind of working with, but to me the contrast between his zen calm ocean waves with Bob just like freaking out constantly and being like so high strung and panicking and not really thinking about anybody other than himself in certain moments, you know what I mean? Like, to me seemed like such a like not preachy way of kind of addressing white privilege, because Bob, like, even if he is a fugitive revolutionary on the run and he's wearing a bathrobe and had to crawl through a toilet, and you know what I mean? Like, even though, like, even despite his circumstances, he still gets to be self-absorbed in a way that the other characters that we see Benicio del Toro with don't get to. And that they are just like so organized, and they don't have to have all these like lofty intellectual convoluted, they don't have code words, right? They don't have like a weird like passwords or like all the stuff that we see the legacy of the French 75 have. Instead they're just like, hey, we're going, get off your phone, we gotta go, pack up the stuff, like do this, and they're so organized, but they're not like, there's no manifesto, they don't have a lot of the touchstones of kind of like more of like a white liberal radical, or at least what I associated with that sort of privilege, right? But it's not judging one over the other necessarily. It's just presenting them in contrast to each other in a way that I thought was very powerful.
It also underscores some of the performative aspects of like, we got to stay off the grid, and then I love that, there's the whole like, does she have a phone? She does, she does, but she says she doesn't, and Leo's trying to charge this old Motorola that can never hold a charge, and then as soon as he gets he escapes with the help of two people who are functioning just fine, continuing to live their lives, but are acting as part of the resistance. As soon as he gets out, Sensei is like, oh, let's get a selfie, because he's so excited that he rescued a member of the French 75. Yeah. So that's in the cloud. That got uploaded. He doesn't care. Like, he's just, there's too many other problems to deal with to worry about stuff like that.
Well, Jen, I think your read is exactly right. And the moment where that really clicked into me for the movie, it was late, but like when he gets caught holding the beer up as they drive by the cop, and he says something like, "Oh, this is the end of the line for me," and Benicio's like, "Not for you.
No, you're fine. You're gonna be fine.
Yeah, you're fine." And like, yes, it's about because they'll find a way out, but it's like, yeah, the white guy's gonna be just fine.
Right.
And
also, they're not getting pulled over because of him, right? Like, that's the implication, I think.
So I'll just shout out, because I know this will probably move us into another one of your questions. Benicio del Toro is my pick for MVP. There's so many good performances here, but I was like totally enthralled every second he was on screen. And I think you all just walked through a lot of his better moments, but I just really loved the notion of like, how just like this network could exist that is all the lowest overlooked people, right? And there's just a beautiful point there about immigration, because we see them in a lot of the caretaker roles, right? It's like the administrative clerk at the jailhouse, and then it's the nurse at the hospital. And these are roles that immigrants usually enter into our society and into our families in an important way. And PT said it right when he said, like, and it's the community that survives and helps them all, and is so smart and so well organized. And I will never, as long as I live, forget Benicio dancing in his sobriety test.
Okay.
Like, what a bizarre choice. And like, I loved every second of it, because he was still calm and he was still in control. He just changed the role he was playing to continue to fulfill it. So that's my vote for long shot. Whatever PT said at the beginning, that you could pick any one of the 5 supporting actors. I'm starting the Benicio campaign. And it reminds me that Phoenician Scheme could have been better.
Ouch.
Although the moment, which is in the trailer, but in the context of the actual scene, I feel like feels a lot more Wes Anderson-y, where he pumps his fists in the air and then just whoop goes in the trapdoor and the carpet rolls over it. Like, it's really good.
That's also a Schindler's List lift, right? There's a moment of that as they're hiding in the ghetto, which I had been seeing this trailer endlessly. So when I watched Schindler's List, I was like, wait a minute, PTA, lovingly homaged some of the other things.
It's been a long time since I watched Schindler's List. I need to go back, gird myself and go back for the emotional torment. I will just note, yes, he was certainly one of the 5 for Benicio. I'll also, not to just rehash what happened on another podcast, but definitely worth listening to the Paul Thomas Anderson and Leonardo DiCaprio interview with Sean Fennessy on The Big Picture. One of the things that PTA says is, he worked on this movie for 20 years. He's been thinking about a Vineland adaptation for a really long time. And he was like, you work on it. And like, part of why you think like, oh, maybe, you shouldn't just sit on stuff and actually just try to do it, is Benicio didn't show up for like 4 or 5 weeks, like just based on the schedule of shooting. And they didn't know how Bob was getting out. Like, he gets arrested, and they just had like, Bob figures out a way to escape, was like all they had in the screenplay. And apparently Benicio del Toro showed up and he goes, oh, what about this? And just like over lunch was just like, it should be the check-in person and then the nurse. And then he leaves by the side, like, and he has had the whole thing worked out. And that maybe includes the some of the stuff around the store, that he underneath his house, that like a bunch of that stuff was just Benicio del Toro riffing when he showed up with so, I thought about the character, like, why wouldn't like these things happen? And they were like, yeah, great, let's do that. And then they did that. And it was great.
That's incredible. That seems like such an important part of the movie to me, that to think about it without that seems like a very different, like a lot of the themes that I'm seeing would not be coming through as strongly without those scenes. Because I think the other thing I thought of, and again, like, I don't know if I'm going to another chance to talk about this, so I'm going to say it now, but the community building that we've been talking about and does link back to the sort of moments of solidarity, or more pointedly, where solidarity breaks for many characters throughout the movie, right? Because we have even like, there's like 3 or 4 character moments. At first, Willa's friends seem like they're going to stay strong and not talk about that she had a phone, right? Because they're all like, nope, her dad wouldn't let her have a phone. He was crazy, right? And it seems like they're gonna hold strong. And then at the last second, one of them cracks, right? And then, Perfidia obviously is called a rat, right? We see her even like she's obviously, we talked earlier about how she might have different reasons or whatever, but she still buckles under that pressure. Is it her name Howard? The guy who has the radio station,
Mm-hmm.
and
yes,
who's
Howard
like the tech
Somerville.
guy. Yeah, he like the second they say, "Well, what about your sister?" Then he cracks, right? He was like, "I'm not afraid," and he wasn't gonna talk. And then they got him to talk. And then even Regina Hall's character, though it is a little ambiguous, I think she sells out to help save Willa, right? Because she wants to make sure that she's okay and that the next generation can live on, right? So I do think that it's and what's interesting is the movie I don't think is necessarily judging any of those characters for making that choice, but it's definitely showing that while the resistance is trying to build community. The opposition is trying to break it apart as much as possible and leverage the sense of community against everybody. But Greg was trying to get us to talk about the cast and who we thought was the best. So who do you think that, like, do we all just agree that it's Benicio del Toro, or do we have an MVP? And I think we have to remove Leonardo DiCaprio from the race because because he's the biggest movie star by a long shot.
I mean, we've given flowers to Benicio correctly and to Tiana Taylor also correctly. I will say the one I have two notes that came with me from Jasmine from seeing it, and her main one is just all caps Sean Penn. It's just like, that's it, like that she just puts that out there, Sean Penn. And it is like, it's easy to forget how good Sean Penn can be because he is kind of a frustrating human being, like in reality. And, you know, for decades has been a difficult person to like root for and pull for in lots of different ways. He's so good in this movie in a way that like, he's the one, I mean, in case people are thinking back an hour plus and we're wondering, he is the grandson of General Ripper from Dr. Strangelove. He has the same weird kind of tics and quirks. He has this like way of walking that both implies that he had some sort of an injury, but also that like, he's just so full of himself. And he like somehow finds a way to carry himself. So he both looks like RFK Jr. and Vince McMahon from the World Wrestling Federation. It's so wild. And yet like he, like, despite being this crazy caricature, he has this like in his eyes and in these like few like kind of quiet moments, he's so like three-dimensionally human. Like he's bad and evil and broken, but he's like a real person. And like, I think I have seen some critiques about this, about the movie in general. And one of them is that it's too sympathetic. Like he's portrayed too much as like a person. And I don't think that's fair, but I think that like, you know, because we see so much of his stories, not just, there's times where we're seeing him as a main character in a sequence. Like he's not just like the antagonist who shows up to you know, threaten people, but we see him like going to that meeting, like being shown to the wedding of the hotel where the wedding's taking place, to be invited into the Christmas Adventurers Club. You know, I don't think that's a fair critique, but I think that that's rooted in the fact that like his performance is so strong that he makes this character feel like a real person, even though so many details of it are just abjectly insane. And out of control, but not unrealistic, because people like that really exist and are in high positions of power. And that's not great.
I mean, I totally agree. Sean Penn's amazing. He's an incredibly serious actor. He's like the definition of serious actor. And to see him giving this just incredibly funny performance, it was just really refreshing. And I don't remember the last time. Like when I think of Sean Penn in the movies, I think back to like when he won those Oscars for like, he won two, right? Mystic River and what was the other one?
Milk.
Oh, Milk. Yeah. Which are very serious movies. And that's just the register that I'm accustomed to. And just, I haven't really heard that much from him other than just like stuff in the news. So good on him for loosening up and bringing what he brought to that movie, to this movie. I'm gonna go in a completely different direction for my MVP, because I think this is just I think like a sort of unsung hero, an actress that I really love, Regina Hall, who Jen just mentioned. You know, she doesn't have a funny line in the script. She plays this sort of like straight woman. She's just like this competent person among the sort of ship of just like incredible personalities and sort of like foolishness, but she's like steady. And so you feel something. I felt something when like the most sort of like decent and competent character on the canvas gets caught. And it makes, so, you know, she doesn't show up very much, but like when she shows up, there's just this feeling of relief, right? Like when Willa is in the bathroom and if you had to think of like one person to come get her to try to save her from all of this stuff, if that's the face that you want to see, right? And while it's true that at the end of the film she has this sort of torturous choice about what to make, like even though she does potentially betray, Bob, she doesn't do it because she doesn't believe in the cause anymore. She does it because she does believe in it, and she's having to make a choice. But that choice isn't to like go against her principles or what she believes in. It's just sort of like she just has two bad choices and she has to just choose the lesser bad thing, right? And so I think that in a movie, again, with just so much going on and so many, like, again, you couldn't be more opposite in terms of like what Sean Penn is doing in the film, but I think that she's really essential to that sort of like core, like that the sort of core idea of, well, progress really happens with these people in the middle, right? And who are just like getting stuff done.
That's 4 of my 5, Jen. Do you have the 5th?
I'm assuming Chase and Findy is number 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's it's shocking that this is her first role, which it is, right? Like it's like she's never been actually in anything.
Not in a movie. I think
somebody
did
didn't
a
watch
show
Presumed Innocent on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, okay.
Jeez.
Well, still, like to go from that to this is really, and to pull it off really is incredible. And I think what's challenging about her role is that she actually doesn't have a lot of speaking to do for a lot of the time. She's kind of in the James Bond, Ethan Hunt, like I'm in a bad situation and I have to get out of it, right? Like a lot of her scenes are just like either physical suspense or action, and that, but with the limited time in which we do have her in scenes where she's actually like having extended conversations, especially the ones with her dad, are what totally sell the character, right? Because like we learn so much about her so quickly, and part of that's because of the screenplay, but I think part of it is because of her performance too. That you both believe that she is the daughter of these people, but then also, and I don't mean that necessarily in a strictly biological sense, right? It's complicated, as we talked about earlier, but that she is in this like sort of lineage of the revolution, but that she's also her own person, and that she's of a different generation. Like I think there's so much about her that stands out and stands on its own in a way that in any other movie and with any other actress I think would not work as well, right? Like she could have easily just been the like, oh, I'm the MacGuffin more than my own character, you know what I mean? Like I'm the thing that's getting tossed around and people are chasing around, but she actually does hold her own in a way that's really incredible.
And it has to do so after that opening 45 minutes with Tiana Taylor, which, is a lot to live up to.
In that context, that they put her in the same pose with the machine gun, but totally works. You're just like, that's her daughter. Like I see it. She earned it. So
my favorite, I think the funniest moment in the movie, and I think but the part of what makes it so funny is that it happens at a critical point in terms of like the action of the film, is when we have the confrontation with her and Sean Penn, and they're figuring out the parentage and stuff, and it's just such high tension drama. And she says like, "Why is your shirt so tight?"
Are you implying that I'm a homosexual?
Yes, it's just it is a perfect and in just like one line, that's just like a perfect like daughter needling her father line, but also it's just the perfect line to just set off the fuse of like this guy, and for him to just have this volcanic breakdown. And it's so perfect, and it's so nice to go from just like like catching your breath and like wondering what's going to happen, and then to just laughing hysterically at a line. And like it's just like that, just a perfect sort of like microcosm of like what this entire movie is, right? It's just like it moves just the way you think it's going to do everything that you want it to do, but it's going to do a little something extra and going to surprise you just like throughout.
I was going to bring up that moment when PT was talking about Sean Penn as like that's the perfect moment for Lockjaw, because you can see like he's got that tactical mind, and he goes the 3 steps, and the biggest insult he can imagine is having his masculinity punctured, which she does, and yet not in the way he expected. So it is. So agree about her, and then just his follow-up is exactly that as well. It's a really fun moment.
I also go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say his performance sells the hypocritical self-loathing, like he's doubles down on being racist because he desires the thing that he knows he shouldn't be. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's so twisted, but it's so believable because of his performance of it, right? Like it's both scary and kind of like, oh, right, I can see, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, you understand his character's point of view, even though it really doesn't make any sense.
Well, because it also feels like, oh, this is to the degree there's logic here, it's a logical conclusion for someone who's just like, I'm trying to get more, and I'm not allowed to want the thing that I want. I'm not allowed to like just get a woman who is a different race than me and be a partner with her. So I need to get more everywhere else. So I'm going to like join the military, rise in the ranks, get into the secret society, become this, like that will fill the hole within me. So that is, you know, the fact that I can't acknowledge myself because my hatred is too strong to let myself like just be happy and like maybe do something. I don't know if he could have been happy with Perfidia because I don't know if that's their dynamic, but like maybe they could have just like moved to the suburbs and played weird power games every night with each other. But he would never, his pathology would never allow him to do that. So yeah, it like he spins out from that into this crazier and crazier thing. But so does America. That's what we do as a country.
Maybe this is stupid to say in that context, but I just kept thinking when he was on screen many times about that tweet that went viral this spring, which is, I always knew rich white men would ruin the world. I just didn't expect them to be such losers. It's like, yeah, like that's part of it, right? Is that they are these really thin-skinned men that have sucked up all the power. And, you know, I always like Chris Hayes has coined that Elon Musk bought Twitter to be the main character on the internet. It's that same kind of, it's like all they want is to be relevant and to be accepted, and yet they fear it all. So all those men were great, and that also gives me the opening to say I'm not going to nominate him as like best supporting. I loved Tony Goldwyn in this, and he's one of those actors that like always delivers in whatever small role he gets, and he's also that guy. I'm like, you know, the whole time he's on screen, I'm like, who is he? Where do I know him from? And you know, he had a pretty beefy role in Oppenheimer. He was on Hacks recently, and I believe the latest season for an arc. And so it's like, oh yeah, and he just brings that like square white guy energy that you're like, at once, I can't take any of this seriously, but yet it totally makes sense that that's the kind of guy who would be in the secret cabal Christmas club. Hail Saint Nick.
Similar as well to his compatriot in, I think, all of his scenes, who is Jim Downey, the Saturday Night Live writer.
I didn't know that was him.
Most memorable from Billy Madison for the I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. He's the guy who says at the end of this movie, a semen demon? To Lockjaw's attempt to explain how he impregnated a woman that they don't think is human.
Well, and I mean, this, I feel like these are all silly, but since it's PTA, you know, he knows all of these. The really old actor who's in the center in front of the pheasants, I always remember him as the heavy in Newsies, right? When all the newsboys are singing and dancing and like loving life. And he's like he's Schneider who, you know, calls the bullies and stuff. So it's like, yeah, PTA can invoke all that with some of these castings. It's really brilliant.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the costume designs in this, because the way that because like we have Lockjaw on the one hand being like the hyper aggressive version of white supremacy, right? But then the like, it's just a Patagonia fleece vest, or like there's a shot where you can see like the Lacoste alligator.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? It's just like that kind of like the nicety of or like it's so innocuous. They're just like wearing these like preppy nice clothes. But immediately they're coded as like, oh no, like it's very menacing. But
since we're talking about costumes, should we move to Oscar watch?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, there's also gonna be a casting Oscar This is, I feel like, very much in the running, considering
Mhm.
what we're talking about. So yeah, let's go to Oscars watch. PTA, I believe, has been nominated for, I want to say, 11 Oscars and has won none of them. So there is very much like it's his time narrative that could occur this award season. I don't know. What do you all think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you said earlier, Jen, that it's probably his most accessible or one of his most accessible films. And, you know, I can definitely see already critics like lighting up behind it, and I can see it winning a bunch of critics awards. In terms of getting, being able to finish at the Oscars, it's going to depend on the rest of the slate because it is not a traditional sort of like Oscar movie, right? Like comedy doesn't always play well in terms of like winning Best Picture. I think it's a lock for a nomination for tons of nominations. I think it should win. I mean, like again, we'll see what the rest of the slate looks like this year, but in terms of like Paul Thomas Anderson himself and the respect for him, I think that given that he's going to be up for director, presumably, and adapted screenplay, and then I'm assuming he's like a producer and would win for Best Picture as well. Then I feel like it would be a shame if this year I would be shocked actually if this year goes by without him winning at least one of those awards. My guess is adapted screenplay is the most likely, but I don't know. What do you all think?
So it may actually end up running an original, is what I've heard.
Really?
I think I heard
Okay.
Katie Rich on Prestige Junkie saying that because the credits in the movie say inspired by Vineland, it's not going to be considered, or at least I think this is what the studio is going to push for, that it's not a full adaptation of Vineland because because so little of it actually ends up in the movie. But which
Sure.
I think would be really interesting because I do think the assumption for most people is going to be that it's inadapted.
Yeah, when Jen, when you at the beginning of the episode before we got even into spoiler mode and you were trying to describe what Antonio was just referencing, that like it's really accessible, like, it isn't quite as art housey, it has this like core kind of action element, like the idea of this is what this director does really well, taken together in a way that is going to be not necessarily the most accessible, all the time, but more accessible for a broad number of people than maybe some of his stuff in the past. That sounds like the last two director picture winners. That's Sean Baker and Anora. That's Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer. So it does feel like narratively that could make sense. It would be interesting to see if this movie is landing with this huge amount of hype and a lot of kind of energy of like, this is the movie of the moment, with the political elements, but also with the sort of, I feel like I've seen a few comments like between Letterboxd and just like other social media like corners where people are like, oh, this is capturing the absurdity of living right now, of like existing in society. Like all the humor parts are sort of the like, yeah, this is weird, like everything's off, and like it's strange, and that it's tapping into that as like a zeitgeist thing in a way that like something like Hamnet or something like Marty Supreme probably won't do. That doesn't mean that those movies might be also incredible. I mean, Hamnet has been really well received. There's some potential of, is that the sort of small, quiet Shakespearean love, and this is the big dominant, big time director, Saving Private Ryan. With then some people, then I heard that, and the flip was, but Chloe Zhao's won the way Steven Spielberg had won. So is it actually whatever? That it's complicated. So anyway, I think it would not be surprising here now, late September of 2025, that if in March 2026, when we reconvene, after many other times that we reconvened, but when we convene after the Oscars, that we were just sort of like, yep, that's Yeah, of course. Like, it was his time. He had the right movie. Like, it was Oppenheimer again. Like, he had everything came together for this to be his time. Of course, it won, the most Oscars of the night. It had a ton of nominations. Like, yeah, this makes total sense. Or maybe, but like, maybe not, because maybe it'll peter out. But I think Antonio's right. This is getting a lot of nomination. Like, I would, right now, almost be surprised if it didn't get like double-digit nominations, or at least like 7 or 8 nominations.
I don't disagree with anything that's been said, so I'm going to change the conversation to a slightly different question, which is, I now am worried about Sinners, and I would put us roughly where we were last year, and it's not completely analogous. The box office matters, but A24, we all thought Sing Sing coming into July and August was going to ride high, and A24 would give it an amazing campaign. And then The Brutalist showed up, and The Brutalist wiped out, the small studio's budget all went towards Brutalist. And we were all frustrated by Sing Sing kind of disappearing. And, even though it's on a smaller scale, A24 then had to worry about Sebastian Stan with A Different Man and a few others. And, so my big question is, what's Warner Brothers going to do? Because now I think unexpectedly, or perhaps only in their wildest of wildest dreams, would they have 2 huge hit movies, and, box office on this one, TBD. It won't be Sinners big. It doesn't sound like it'll be respectable. Are they really going to mount 2 full campaigns, considering how many categories these 2 films are going to be fighting it out in? I'm thinking back to the head of Neon saying they spent more than the budget on Anora to get Anora's campaign off the ground. I don't know if Warner Brothers has that kind of money unless Paramount comes in with a bigger offer very quick.
Warner Brothers has that money. I don't, it's all, the books are always cooked, but I feel a little bit like, sure, A24 could blow their budget on one movie, but I don't know. It's Warner Brothers Discovery. They got all kinds of stuff that's making money for them. They can afford to do it. The question will be, is there going to be some degree of I think it was almost a more emotional control than financial control of is Ryan Coogler going to be upset if he has to defer, if he feels like he's sort of being deferred for Paul Thomas Anderson because it's PTA's time and not his time. And, I don't know. I'm curious how that could play out.
Considering the themes of both of those movies, the optics of that would not be great.
It wouldn't be great. I agree.
Just saying.
Your point, Jen. If they're going to market, if they're going to move One Battle After Another to original, that's where Sinners is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, if something has the option to be adapted, you want it to go to adapted because there's generally less competition. Here, you're going to have to deal with Hamnet, which is a big deal. But I don't know. If I were Warner Brothers and I had, again, this is a wonderful problem. You have 2 amazing films that could potentially win Best Picture. But I would put the screenplays in 2 different places. Imagine a night where Paul Thomas Anderson and Ryan Coogler win screenplay Oscars. What a night, right?
True.
I love it. But I think the one issue is that they don't get to decide. The Academy will rule on where it goes.
Right.
But the Academy, the Academy also, if I remember correctly, put "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" and adapted because there was some sort of a similar, inspired by Homer's The Odyssey, which it kind of is, but isn't really. There's more some jokes in there about it. So
Barbie was adapted because something. So franchise. Franchise, whatever.
Just to clarify, Katie Rich said that she thought it would classify as original because of the way that the language that's being used about the relationship between the film and the book. But she did not. I was that my filling in of the implication was that maybe the studio would push for that because they thought it would give it a better chance or something like that. So she didn't say anything about how they would campaign it, but I think you're right that ultimately it's out of their control. Yeah, I don't know, and I do think that this is not a typical Oscar baity movie, but it's so undeniable we have to give it a spot anyway. Both films that we're talking about do sort of fill that space. But the other complicating thing too is if we think about the Academy being more international, both these movies, Sinners and One Battle After Another, are like, and I'm not the first person to say this. I heard many critics say this, that both of them are very American stories, right? And they're about very political and cultural specific things that are specific to America. How many of those would translate to a more international audience? I think Oppenheimer, all very American story, but because it has global implications, has more relevance built in if you're not American.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know
history,
if you could say that for,
it's more well-known history than
Yeah.
what Sinners is talking about, which is part of why Sinners is so good, but maybe makes it a little bit more like, okay. I do feel like the Americanness of One Battle After Another feels like something that will be a benefit for international voters, because they're like, what is happening over there, you guys? And this is a movie where they could be like, oh, wow, great. Yeah, things are weird. Like, you guys are being weird over here. Like, check out this movie. It shows all about it. So I think that could hurt Sinners, but not One Battle After Another. I'm somewhat hesitant to put them. I mean, they're the same studio, and that's an issue in terms of budget. Despite my earlier stats that they have an infinite budget for campaigning. There is a budget issue, I'm sure. But I think that even though this is an action-y movie and it's a bigger budget, One Battle After Another, because of all the political elements and because of the pedigree of Paul Thomas Anderson, always a bridesmaid, but a very frequent bridesmaid for the Academy. Like, he's been there. And so that doesn't feel too weird that he's there. Again, that I think, Sinners has that a little bit because of Black Panther. But I'm wondering if, I think Sinners is still going to be more in like that Avatar Wicked zone of like, well, this is a blockbuster. Whereas I don't think even if One Battle After Another did get to $200 million, which doesn't look like it will, but if it did, like, I don't think people would be like, that movie's just a blockbuster. Like, it would always be a different thing because of the names behind it.
I agree that The Floor is probably a screenplay nomination, though, because I'm looking at the past nominations, and even Inherent Vice, a movie that people actively deride for its screenplay, got an adapted screenplay nomination. I actually kind of like that movie, even though it's a
good
mess.
movie.
I thought it was funny, and actually, like, is kind of the closest thing to a predecessor tonally to this movie in some ways, out of PTA's filmography.
Also a Thomas Pynchon book, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
My favorite Letterboxd review, it was that there's Frenzied Cokehead PTA and Stoner Dad PTA, and this movie finally brought the two PTAs together to create one movie, which I think is exactly right.
That's funny.
So I guess the category that I'm concerned about then, hearing all you're saying, I think supporting actor, all of our praise for Benicio, I don't think he makes it in because Sean Penn has to go in before he gets in, I feel like, right?
Yes.
That's right.
As much as I love this movie, you
Again,
can't
the
say...
optics not great.
Yeah, right.
True.
But, and then, presumably you have Adam Sandler and you have Jen's beloved Paul Mescal for Hamnet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's another big one out there.
Stellan Skarsgård for Sentimental Journey.
Skarsgård
and Jeremy Strong for the Bruce Springsteen movie is the other presumed nominee at this point.
So I don't know. Maybe Mark Hamill still makes it in for Life of Chuck. Whoever predicted that back in May, good on that guy. But
go, Greg.
no, I mean, it's just a bloodbath of a category this year. Absolutely,
yeah.
Right? Like the heavy hitters in that are unbelievable. So it's going to be really hard for anybody to get.
I mean, and after that list, there's both Miles Caton and Delroy Lindo in Sinners, Benicio for One Battle After Another. I'm just looking at the Gold Derby odds, and there's Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein. Maybe we won't have to worry about because people didn't seem to like Frankenstein. And then there's Akira Imoto for Rental Family, which feels a little outdated because I don't think that movie was well received in Toronto. But, I think Benicio could be there. And it's not, unheard of, especially if a movie's got a lot of momentum to get two nominees in one category. But yeah, I think that Sean Penn's in line ahead of Benicio, which, again, Jasmine sent me a message and it was all caps, Sean Penn. And she left that movie being like, he was incredible. Like, that was the standout of a movie with a lot of standouts. He was the standout. But part of me is also like, well, Sean Penn has won 2 Oscars and Benicio only has 1. Like, shouldn't he get a second Oscar? Like, why shouldn't we be pushing him? But it's tough. What do we think about supporting actress?
I was just gonna say though, if the ABC producers get a vote, it's 100% Benicio because you don't want Sean Penn on stage, right? He always kills the ceremony every time he comes on. Sorry, Antonio. You think Teyana Taylor can get in?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that Sean Penn is the Oscar baitier role, and I think that Teyana Taylor also the Oscar baitier role. Even though she's only in the first act of the movie, she is the first act of the movie. That's her. It's all her, and it's such a ferocious, like just like charismatic performance that I think I think it can't be denied. I haven't looked at the Gold Derby rankings, but I'd be shocked if she wasn't pretty high up there.
The LA Times has her listed as number 1.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Okay.
Followed by the Swedish name I cannot pronounce from sentimental value.
Inga Lilias?
Sure.
Yes.
And Amy Madigan for Weapons.
Okay.
Ariana Grande for Wicked for Good. Wumi
J-Lo.
Misaku for
Where's
Sinners.
J-Lo?
That seems naive. I would love that, but I don't think that's happening.
That would be great.
So
Gold Derby also, in addition, has both Elle Fanning and Inga Lilias, both for sentimental value. Speaking of double nominees, and Gwyneth Paltrow for Marty Supreme in there as well, which feels a little bit like sight unseen. Like, we'll see, maybe, but that also could be one that movie gets shown, and then people are like, okay, and we kind of put her off to the side and go, okay, and we move on. But yeah, I would be shocked if there's not a supporting actor and a supporting actress nomination for this movie. The fact that like it could be either Sean Penn or Benicio del Toro or both. It could be Teyana Taylor or Chase Infinity or both.
Chase Infinity is an easy, we'll get you later. Like you just got here. Kind of. You know what I mean? Like I can see
Ingenue,
voters.
Brand new actress. They love young actresses.
It's true.
Where's your proof, Mikey Madison?
Uh-huh.
I was just gonna note, the concern that Teyana Taylor is only in a little bit. What did Judi Dench win Best Supporting Actress for? Only 6 minutes on screen one time. And what's ironic is she actually did the same kind of open mouth kiss in that role that Teyana Taylor did in this one. So it's exactly right.
I can't believe I haven't talked about the score of this movie yet, which I absolutely loved. This is a Johnny Greenwood who does a lot of scores for PTA. Got nominated for Phantom Thread and Power of the Dog, which is not a PTA movie, but is a great score. The fact that it could be him, Johnny Greenwood v. Ludwig Göransson, is wild.
Yeah.
I will be very conflicted because I love both of those scores. But the score here, if you listen to it on its own, has so many qualities, like contributes so much to the propulsiveness of the movie and the kind of like frenzy of the movie. Like I think there's a lot of sequences where it's just like jazz piano, but it's in that crazy, unpredictable jazz solo kind of feeling in terms of like there's just someone riffing and there's a pause, but then it starts up again, and it really does fit the sort of like one battle after another relentless kind of feel of the movie. So
it has real Punch Drunk Love vibes. Like, and I'm trying to look up, did Johnny Greenwood do the music for that? I believe he did. Nope. John Brian.
To your point, Jen, I think it felt like there could be a piano player in my theater. And, the orchestral play-alongs have become all the rage at every pop orchestra in the country. It feels like this is one that you could do a live show of. The moment in the score that really threw me is in one of the late chases, as it's when Willa is in Sean Penn's car. The piano almost does Wizard of Oz. Did you hear this? Like it did kind of, but like it took me like 4 repetitions of it before I realized it wasn't doing that, but it like so like clearly melded in my mind, which was just perfect for that moment. It's like, yes, let's catch the Wicked Witch and so on. So it was a great score. So really fun.
I'll just note again, like, I don't want to always defer to it, but just to say it's here. Gold Derby has 11 nominations right now for One Battle After Another. Picture, director, actor, supporting actress, best casting. Oh, best adapted screenplay, pending categories, presumably. Cinematography, film editing, score, sound, and that's it. And the second thing that Jasmine sent, which I did say that I would say, is she wants a nomination for this movie for best makeup and hairstyling, exclusively for the one eyelash in both eyes that Tiana Taylor has, like, curled up in the middle of her eyes, which we did not talk about, but both of us apparently 2 days later were like, that eyelash was incredible. I don't think that will happen, but who knows? If it gets a best makeup and hairstyling, that's how you know it's going to steamroll.
Steamrolling, yeah.
I'll put a button on the Sinners thing by telling you all and listeners, if you didn't see, they are bringing it back to theaters for Halloween, 70 millimeter IMAX.
Nice.
I don't know if it's just one night or like a week, but that means something, right? That it's still on people's mind. I think that could be a wild, fun Halloween activity, right? So hopefully that I don't want it to be forgotten. I think it's a false choice. I was just thinking of like the worst outcome in my mind is they get split apart for the Golden Globes, and Sinners wins a ton and then gets like blanked at the Oscars. That's the worst narrative for me. But I think there's enough love. Spread it around. It can be an everybody gets something type of year. And I'm not going to forget Hamnet either. I think that's the one we all need to see before we kind of figure out if this is really such a fast car that it can't be caught on some hills.
I think it was PT's earlier point, though, that Hamnet, very sad movie. And the one criticism that people have had is that it's emotionally manipulative, that they feel played into being, that they're being forced to cry. Whereas historically, in the recent past, the Academy sometimes really gravitates towards movies that are more hopeful and uplifting at the end. And so that could be One Battle After Another could have that magical formula in terms of, like, it has the dark, serious, biting commentary, but then at the end makes us sort of feel good and feel connected to each other in a way that maybe Hamnet doesn't. I don't know. We haven't seen Hamnet, so that's hard to say.
It does feel like, again, I guess, having not seen Hamnet, and there's a bunch of other movies we have not seen that have gotten some energy and some chatter behind them, but it does feel like a very classic race of a big movie and a small movie, and the different kinds of emotions and the different kinds of worlds that they are dealing with in the different periods of history. Like, this could be great. This could be, like, especially if, like, we all see Hamnet and we all like it, and we're just sort of like, great. Like, because if right now, if you were like I think that I am with, I believe it was Greg who was like, One Battle After Another, I think, is the best movie of the year. I'm with you. Like, this is top Sinners for me. But if you came and told me Sinners, gets all the accolades, I would be like, that's awesome. I love that. Like, if I end up feeling the same way about Hamnet or whatever other movie becomes like awesome. Like, what a great time. But it probably should be this movie,
I think,
because it's great.
Says the one who drafted it in your hype draft.
Well, and the Fantasy League.
Yeah. Am I the only one who didn't put it in my Vulture?
I didn't either.
I'm the only one who does have it.
I thought Greg did
do you
too.
have it?
I think I do. I was just actually on my phone trying to find my list. Let me pull up my other email and double check. I think, because I know I went 3 big ones, and I think it was One Battle After Another, Hamnet, and Sentimental Value are my 3 big ones.
Because I did Avatar instead of Sentimental Value. That's my...
Yeah, I have it. Hamnet,
Okay.
One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value. And then if I had legs, I'd kick you, which I just want to give kudos to Jen, because you were trying to figure out how you all know my taste. And Jen at the last second was like, oh, we're overthinking it. He just likes Conan O'Brien. And I was sitting in my car going like, that's right, Jen. I just like Conan O'Brien. And that's why I picked, If I had legs, I'd kick you. So
All right.
I'm
Well,
feeling
either
good.
way, I
This
think
is a
it's
good
going to
start.
Yeah, we're in for an exciting award season, and hopefully many, many more movies to come. It is weird to think that maybe we've peaked this early with the best movie of the year, but
also, what if in 10 years we're looking back and we're just like, with this year had Sinners and it had One Battle After Another. Like, That's a good year. That's already a good year.
That's
Everything else is, icing.
It
We
could
just
be 1999
the
territory.
car hasn't crested the top of the road.
Oh my God.
We have not seen what we're about to crash into.
Right. The sun may be in our eyes and we don't know yet.
Can I just say, when the credits roll and you see everybody pull out their phones and like 30% are on Letterboxd, man, does that warm my heart. I love it. I love it so much.
I also need to note, we saw that we went to the local Alamo Draft House. It was on Saturday at 2:30. And the movie ended. And I was like, I don't think there's like something in the credits, but like American Girl was playing and I was feeling that. And they played another song that I was like, this is pretty good. So we were hanging for a little while. There were 2 pockets of people that just started clapping randomly during the credits because I guess 2 people who worked on the movie were there and like their friends were there with them. So some like, assistant grip and costuming wardrobe person or whatever were there in attendance, and we gave them a little round of applause. We joined in and it was lovely.
Amazing. Wow, you're competing with Greg now. Usually he's the one who has stories like that.
Well, he's already seen the VistaVision. I haven't, although I've heard the projector has broken twice at the Vista already, because that's part of the problem is VistaVision projectors and cameras are very difficult to deal with.
Paul Scheer, I assume seeing it at the Vista, said the film burned.
Yeah.
Like it's like you got that old fashioned, like the film just burned apart and they fixed it, but that's crazy.
Well, they switched to a digital projector. Yeah. That was I guess someone I knew was at that screening too. And said
Paul Scheer, you hang out with
him. My buddy Paul Scheer. We were talking
his
about
co-host Amy Nicholson, and we'll go out on this, said define Sean Penn's walk as he walks as if a flagpole is stuck up his butt, and that just is perfect.
And scene. Antonio, I'm so glad we could do this episode. I feel like if people didn't think we did a good job talking this movie, I don't know. Where can folks find you? And I think there's only one place.
So they can find me on Letterboxd at Elefano, AELEFANO. Greg, where can they find you?
They can find me also on Letterboxd at IonCanon, EYEONCANON. I just finished the AFI 100 Years, 100 Movie list. So you can check the end of that project. And on to, I'm going to try to finish the New York Times list we celebrated this summer is my next project. And PT, where can I check to see if you've already watched all those movies?
I haven't, although I'm going to have to ask you off mic whether it was the original list or the updated one from 2000, whatever that was.
I think it was the updated one, but I'm not positive.
Okay. So did you finish
No, it was the old one, because the new one has Lord of the Rings way too high.
Yes, that's Fellowship of the Ring.
I didn't do that one. I did the original.
You can see what of those movies I've seen, and I haven't, because I've instead just watched some dumb noir from the 40s instead. On Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also, if you're there, you can also follow the show, which is at LTR Pod. You can check us out on social media, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com. And you can also just follow the show. You can follow the podcast wherever you're listening right now. Hit follow, hit subscribe, hit like, hit add, whatever it says. Do it. Press the button and make it happen. And keep listening to new episodes as they come out. Jen, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. I promise I am going to log this movie on my Letterboxd. It's embarrassing. I did only see it yesterday, but still, it's still embarrassing. I got to get better at it. Well, we managed to pod less than the runtime of the movie.
Yes.
That's a win.
One episode after another.